My birthday was back in April, but today we are finally looking at how I made my birthday cake this year. Hi there, foodie friends. My name is Carly and welcome back to my channel, Adventures in Yum. For the cake layers, I made my banana cake recipe, which you can find linked in the description. The only thing I changed while making this is instead of adding 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, I added 2 teaspoons of banana extract and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Once the cake batter was ready, we evenly divide the batter between 3 6-inch cake pans. We then bake them for about 30 minutes or until a cake tester comes out clean. I believe that these took closer to 35 or 40 minutes because of the moisture added by the bananas. After chilling the cake in the refrigerator for at least a few hours or overnight, we use a cake leveler or serrated knife to remove the dome tops of each layer. We then make sure that these stay covered and chilled until we're ready to stack the cake. To make the cheesecake filling, I prepared a double batch of my homemade vanilla cheesecake and added it to a foil-lined sheet pan. For the vanilla cheesecake recipe, make sure to check out the link in the video description. Once the cheesecake is baked, cooled, and then chilled in the fridge for at least a few hours or overnight, we take one of our 6-inch cake pans and a knife to cut circles in the cheesecake so that they'll be the same size as our cake layers. Here I cut 4 cheesecake circles because I love a lot of filling in my cakes. I also took a large circle cookie cutter to cut the centers out of 2 of the cheesecake circles, but this didn't go super well, as you'll see in a little bit. Once that was complete, once again, we make sure that the cheesecake is completely covered and in the fridge until we're ready to use it. I also made some strawberry compote for this cake as well as a graham cracker crust crumble. I recently shared a tutorial for my viral lemon, strawberry, and cheesecake cake that I made last summer. In that video, I shared how I made strawberry compote as well as a graham cracker crust crumble, so make sure to check the description for a link to that video for the recipes. Finally, before we assemble the cake, we need something to cover the cake and act as the edible glue. Usually I would make a batch of my favorite Swiss meringue buttercream, but I wanted to try something a little bit different by making a Nutella chocolate ganache. To make this ganache, I added some heavy whipping cream to semi-sweet chocolate, heated that in the microwave, and once the chocolate was fully melted, we mixed in the Nutella. I usually make this ganache with white chocolate, but I wanted a more rich chocolate flavor. However, this ganache did not turn out quite right, as you're about to see. Now it's time to assemble the cake. We add a dollop of ganache to act as the glue to keep the cake on the cake board. Then we add one of our cake layers, followed by some Nutella ganache and a layer of graham cracker crumbs. Next, we add 1 disc of cheesecake and center it on that cake, followed by one of the cheesecake discs with the center cut out. We then add some strawberry compote to fill in the center of that cheesecake layer. Then we add the next layer of cake and repeat the same pattern until we get to our final cake layer. I like to flip my top cake layer to give it a nice flat top. Once the cake was fully stacked, we used an offset spatula to spread the ganache into a thin, even layer on the outside of the cake. This is our crumb coat that will help lock in crumbs so that we won't have any cake crumbs showing in our final layer of ganache. Once that's done, pop it into the refrigerator for about 30 minutes. Next, we're adding more ganache and attempting to smooth it out. Just like the viral cake I shared right before Mother's Day, this one was having major technical difficulties as well. What's fun is that I was working on them on the same day, so apparently the cake gods were trying to tell me not to work on any cakes that day. It was one of those days where nothing seems to be working the right way, so I had to just accept it and come back on a different day. Like I said before, you can have a lot of experience, but things can still go wrong, just like they did for me with back-to-back cake issues. As you can see, the first attempt at this cake did not go well at all, but I learned a lot, took it all apart, and was able to try it again, so let's check that out. After carefully deconstructing the cake, I was able to salvage the cake layers, make new cheesecake, and luckily have extra strawberry compote and graham cracker crust crumble. I also, of course, made a new ganache. However, I decided to make a peanut butter and Nutella ganache this time. To make this, we add 1 cup or about 260 milliliters of heavy whipping cream to 1 cup or about 170 grams of white chocolate chips. We heat that in the microwave for about 30 seconds to 1 minute, stir, and then continue to heat in short increments until all the white chocolate has completely melted. We then add 1 cup or about 296 grams of Nutella and 1 cup or about 256 grams of peanut butter. We mix everything together, cover with plastic wrap, and gently push the plastic wrap directly on top of the ganache, and finally let it completely chill in the fridge. After letting it fully chill, it should look gorgeously smooth like this. If it's too firm, let it set out for just a little bit in order to allow it to soften slightly, which will make piping and smoothing much easier. Now we can correctly assemble this cake. We start with some ganache on the cake board and use an offset spatula to spread it into a thin layer, followed by a layer of cake. Then we add a very thin layer of ganache and 2 discs of cheesecake. We fill the center of the cheesecake with strawberry compote, add a thin layer of ganache on top of that cheesecake, and some graham cracker crust crumble. We then add our next layer of cake and repeat. I decided to also cut a hole in the center of that middle cake layer, the same size as the cheesecake, so that the entire center is filled with strawberry compote. Once we flip the top layer of cake upside down for a nice flat top, we add ganache and use an offset spatula to smooth it into our thin crumb coat layer on the outside of this cake. I also decided to add 4 dowels to this cake to make sure that it remained structurally sound this time. Once we let the crumb coat ganache layer set for at least 15 to 20 minutes in the refrigerator, we're piping more ganache on the outside of the cake and then using a combination of an offset spatula and cake scraper to smooth the sides of the cake. We add some more ganache in places where it needs it and continue to smooth the ganache until we're happy with it. Then we pop it back in the fridge for another 30 to 60 minutes. Before we finish this cake, if you're enjoying this video, then please make sure to hit that like button, click subscribe, and ring that bell to be notified about my latest video. Unlike last year when I had a very clear idea to do a galaxy cake theme, this year I didn't really have an idea for quite a while, but I did have this random idea pop in my head that sounded fun, so I figured let's give it a try. I know it's hard to see, but this is a floral texture sheet, and it's more commonly used to add texture design to fondant, but I'm not the biggest fan of fondant, so I decided to try white vanilla melting wafers. I started with the top of the cake by adding some of the melts and then laying this rose texture sheet on top, making sure to softly press down and ensure that the melts completely cover the top. We then put this in the fridge for about 5 to 10 minutes to allow the candy melts to fully harden. There were some melts that went over the side, so I decided to trim them to make decorating the sides of the cake easier. This part was a bit tricky and it took a while, but heating up a paring knife definitely helped. Once again, the cake goes back in the fridge for about 10 minutes to ensure that the ganache stays nice and firm while we decorate the sides of our cake. Next, we take the texture sheet and add melting wafers on top of the textured side, spreading them out, tapping on the counter to remove air bubbles, and once it's big enough to put on the side of the cake, we carefully add it and hold it against the side of the cake. It will slowly start to set, so we want to make sure that it sets with the sheet following the curve of the cake and not with the texture mat curving away from the cake. We repeat this process a total of 3 times to completely cover the sides of the cake. Once all of the melts were completely set, we carefully trim the excess melts on top of the cake with a heated paring knife, and then we're ready to add some color. I decided to try these new edible glitters by using a method called dry brushing. It's just like it sounds because we dip a dry food brush in the edible glitter and then brush it directly onto the cake. I tried to make it look like there were white, pink, and purple roses, but the purple stands out way more than the others, so I wasn't quite happy with how it looked. So I decided to make a mixture of purple, pink, and burgundy edible glitters combined with some extract, or you can also use some alcohol to make an edible paint. Then we simply brush the edible paint over the whole cake. And to get the edible paint in all the little grooves, we want to make sure to also dab the brush all over the roses as well. This color combo ended up looking more like rose gold than I expected, but honestly, I don't mind. I think it looked really pretty. And here's the completed cake. While this cake did have some technical and design difficulties, in the end, I'm happy with how it turned out because I think it looks really fun and cool, and I tried a few new techniques. And of course, we also want to see that lovely cross section. The combination of the subtle banana cake layers combined with the creamy vanilla cheesecake, fresh pop of strawberry compote, a little texture and graham cracker flavor from the crumble, and creamy, dreamy peanut butter and Nutella ganache is so yummy, especially when you add a little extra graham cracker crust, crumble, and strawberries on top. What do you think of this birthday cake design? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you're interested in checking out some of the products I used in this video, then please make sure to check out that video description below for some of their Amazon links. Thank you so much for joining me today, foodie friends. I'll see you next time for another yummy adventure.